Mine. This one will.
I've got a different button, you see. This one.
There we go. Thank you all for coming. I know for most of us it's our first housing committee meeting. Be gentle on each other. Some housekeeping first. If there's a fire alarm, please make your way to the nearest exits. They say they're there. If you're using Modern Gov, you can keep that on, but otherwise, if you can turn off your mobile phones or put them on silent, and during the meeting, you should only be using electronic devices to access council and committee information so that you're not distracted. The meeting is being filmed for live or subsequent broadcast, except where there are confidential items which you don't have tonight. By entering the council chamber and using the public seating areas, you are consenting to being filmed. If this presents any difficulty, please inform Democratic Services. Some additional points. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. If I don't see it, keep it up and then I'll make a note and I'll nod, and wait for an invitation from me to speak. Remember to turn your microphone off when you've finished speaking. Please face the microphone when speaking and speak loudly, clearly and as close as possible to the microphone. When referring to a specific report, page or slide, mention the report, page or slide so that all members have a clear understanding of what is being discussed. It's particularly important given the size of the pack. And then finally, you'll get bored of this in the future. Can you check your pigeonholes in the members' lounge for any post? We've had a couple of apologies. Linda and Terry. Is everyone all right being called first names tonight? Yep. Yep, that's fine. They aren't here. If anyone knows of any others, I know there's not because everyone else is here. And then, has anyone got any declarations of interest? No, thank you. The minutes of the 19th of March, I know only two of us were here, but you can approve them even if you weren't here. If you want to abstain, you can. Everyone would have had a chance to look at the minutes. Anyone got anything that they want to amend on those? Or we can move to a vote to approve those. Okay. All those in favour of approving the minutes, please raise your hand. That's unanimous, thank you. We would normally have public questions and members' questions. We don't have any for tonight. The first substantive item on our agenda is a housing and tenancy fraud policy. I'd like to introduce Emma, Head of Service Counter Fraud and Enforcement Unit, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Emma Cathcart, the Head of Service for the Counter Fraud and Enforcement Unit, which is a shared service across all of the Gloucestershire councils, slightly including Gloucester City, but we deliver services in terms of counter fraud activities and enforcement support, investigation work. For Stroud, that means that we also help to look after your housing stock, so tenancy and housing fraud, and they will be pieces of work within our work stream that will include supporting the staff with their visits, audits. We'll look at your housing waiting lists to ensure that those on it are correct and the numbers. But to kick things off and to support the work we're doing, we've reviewed the policy. So this is just an overarching policy in terms of the work that we'll do. It should also be read and consideration given to our counter fraud and anti-corruption policy, which was adopted in April at Audit Committee, and also the corporate enforcement policy that will exist. So again, how the council as a whole look at prosecution and enforcement activity. We are reviewing that this year, so that will also be reviewed. In terms of reference within the policy to a zero tolerance approach, that should be tempered with, we obviously take each case on its own merits. So we've got to consider the evidential test, we've got to consider the public interest test, vulnerable tenants, the information on each case. But we clearly have to say that we do have a zero tolerance approach to people committing fraud and abusing public funds. So, but to give you assurance that there is consideration that goes behind each of the cases that we take and the action that we go through. Hopefully the policy is relatively straightforward, so I'll just take it as read, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, I found it interesting to look at the CFEU web page. I didn't see a link, but I managed to find it. It was a bit difficult to find it on the council website. And over the last 4 years, there hasn't really been an increase in fraud detected. And a lot of the fraud also appears to be irregularity rather than fraud. Is that so? That's my reading.
So Stroud only joined the partnership properly in April of this year.
Oh.
So prior to that, you weren't a partner council. We did deliver services to you in specific areas. Those were revenues and benefits and housing where we could, and that's been reported. But as a partner authority, there'll be more delivery in terms of strategy, corporate support, individual cases and moving forward. So I think tempered with a lot of changes that have happened in the housing department, and dealing with COVID, dealing with some of the challenges. The website, we've been waiting for the new council website to go live to load up the page. There is an intranet page, but for information, you can obviously look at my previous audit committee reports, but the web page should go live pretty soon.
Okay. And so we now got a 4.6 equivalent officers working on it compared to 2.6 previously, or how do I read that?
So I don't know where those statistics come from. My team consists of 16 officers, full or part-time, but we deliver services across 6 partner councils, a tackle company, and another 3 or 4 councils. So your equivalent of that, I can give you the hours that we deliver and how much it costs, but it in terms of officers, it's not really comparable to what's gone before.
Okay. Well, I look interested then to get the information on the website updated, but of course it gives that impression that there's 4.6 staff members now employed doing this without a big doubling in increase in fraud detected or recovery. So I'm just sort of wondering how this development will shape up.
Without knowing where you got that information from, it's difficult for me to comment, because that web page you're referring to doesn't exist. So if you're looking
I
at...
can find it on the council website.
If you're referring to transparency data,
Yeah.
which may be also part of it, that would have been reported by ARA,
Right.
who were the counter fraud provision prior to April.
Ah, right. Okay.
Not my team. So I
Okay.
would suggest we fed into those statistics, because transparency data requests and requires that fraud information is captured. So we would have fed that information to ARA, and they would have uploaded it. So I would predict that potentially that's what's covered.
Okay.
But we're a totally different department, so
Okay.
really you need to start from scratch from April.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. So on item 6, the committee resolves to approve and adopt the housing and tenancy fraud policy attached to this report, and authorises the strategic director of communities to approve future minor amendments to the policy in consultation with the strategic head of housing, head of service counter fraud and enforcement unit, and the chair of housing committee. Do we have a proposer for that? Elizabeth, thank you. And a seconder?
Yeah.
Lucas, thank you. Do you want to say anything now, Lucas, or later?
Well, I'll say something now in the sense that it's really good to see point 6 about the vulnerable tenants, which sort of moderates the initial impression that we're hard at it. And whether the figures are right or wrongly, I'm sort of interesting to see that actually the level of fraud is, I don't know, percentage-wise of the total income, doesn't seem very high. So I think it's good that the unit exists, that the policy exists, course, we need to nip fraud in the bud because it damages everything. But on the other hand, I'm not frightened by the level of fraud that exists in the Stroud district.
Anyone else want to contribute to the debate? I just add that it's important, given our shortage of housing in our district, that it's allocated in the right way. And, you know, we obviously want to support people, but we want to support the right people. Did you want to sum up, Elizabeth?
Just two phrases that I pick out from the policy. One is on page 19, that, you know, the aim right at the beginning, 1.1, is that it's to prevent the misuse of the housing stock and ensure that properties are correctly allocated to those most in need. You know, that's what we're all about. We're about meeting the needs of those most in need. And then on page 21, under 5.2, I noticed tackling unlawful subletting is key to providing social housing, again, to those who are in greatest need. And we may not have a great deal of fraud at the moment, but the whole point of having a policy like this is so that if we do get it, we can immediately tackle it and don't suddenly have to say, oh, here's a problem, what should we be doing about it? So, you know, that's the whole point of the policy, isn't it? So I move that we accept this policy.
Okay, we'll move to the vote. Those in favour of adopting the resolution? Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You can, the webpage.
Yeah.
The next item is the housing revenue account outturn 2023-2024. We've got John to speak to that report. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through the report. It's just run through the major variances and position for the outturn HRA revenue and capital position. If I jump straight into the housing revenue account outturn position, which is on table 1 on page 26, the outturn position reports an underspend of 1853k. It is proposed that 210k of this is transferred to earmark reserves for specified purposes. The remaining underspend of 1643k will transfer to general reserves to bolster the financial position of the HRA. Supervision and management, 802k underspend. Over recent years, a number of posts have become vacant, leading to variances within various teams and are actively being recruited to. A service review took place during 23-24 to review the tenancy management team to ensure that we strengthen our resources, resilience and our offer to tenants. The teams and variances listed in the paragraph 3.6 have been advertised and this process is ongoing. Repairs and maintenance, 117k underspend. Investment revenue reports a 286k variance due to an overspend in cyclical painting contract. There is slippage within radon works of 197k due to procurement timescales being exceeded. Fire risk assessment remedials are also reporting a slippage of 296k. This is the result of delays to work programmes as the procurement of the assessments took longer than expected. Independent living service, 280k underspend. 184k of the underspend is reduction in the cost of gas and 100k reduction in electricity as a consequence of the change in national utility costs. Moving on to the HRA capital programme, which is in table 5, page 30. The outturn position reports an underspend of 5.563k. It is proposed that 462k of the slippage on the capital projects will be carried forward to 24-25. Major works report 4.853k underspend and slippage, and major works totaling 893k have been delivered during 23-24. Kitchens and bathrooms, 673k slippage is due to a late start in the kitchens and bathrooms programme and delivery issues from contractors on completion of the works. slippage of 129k for kitchens and 544k for bathrooms is requested in order to complete the works for 24-25. Excuse me. Doors and windows, 496k underspend and slippage. 239k underspend in the doors programme is due to the contract coming to a natural end and procurement and mobilisation of a new contractor. Windows report an underspend of 257k relating to the Wave 2 decarbonisation project, where the full budget being spent is dependent on the outcome of the retrofit surveys. Slippage of 247k is requested to co-fund and complete the project for the windows and retrofit works in 24-25. Environmental works, 1.64 million slippage relates to the decarbonisation Wave 2 retrofit works. This work is pending the retrofit assessments and designs being completed before work can begin on the properties. 1430k of the slippage is requested to co-fund and complete the project in line with the 2-year agreement with DESNZ. 170k relates to environmental works, for which slippage is also requested. Fire risk works, 593k slippage. All FRAs were delivered during the year. However, following 2 procurements, there has been a delay in completing the fire compartmentalisation works. Excuse me for that phrase. The quality of FRA remedial works delivered within the financial year reduced, and therefore slippage of 593k is requested to complete the works. Acquisitions, 545k underspend and slippage. There is an underspend of 1.028k against budget on the purchase of LAHF properties. Slippage of 101k represents costs associated with bringing 6 of the LAHF acquisitions up to the lettable standard, which will continue into early 24-25. There is a 470k budget for the purchase of Section 106 properties in Wootton Under Edge, which has been requested as slippage for 24-25. And there was spend of 483k in opportunity-led acquisition pot, which will provide future development site for new housing within the HRA. So that's just a brief overview of the housing outturn report for 23-24. Open to any questions.
John, we spent 483,000 on land acquisition. Where was that? It's on page 33 of the main report.
Yeah.
But where did we buy the land?
I would have to look that. Do you know of that fund, Tara? Or no, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Charlie?
Apologies, I don't quite know who I should be addressing this question to, but I'm just a bit concerned about the massive underspend in the supervision and management department. It's great that you'd be saving so much money, but the department's also massively understaffed at the moment. And it's just a question of, should some of this money be going back in and looking at increasing the wages of the housing department to try and retain staff as well as bring new staff in, is the first part of the question. And leading on from that, as we're losing staff and they're doing an exit interview, are they saying the reasons why they're leaving?
So yeah, first part of your question, it's quite difficult to give more money to existing staff, excuse me, without going through a thorough job evaluation process. So all of the roles that we have will go through a HR process, which is benchmarked with comparable roles against comparable organisations. So we wouldn't be able to take the money and just boost up a salary as such. There is a process to follow. The knock-on impact of that is there might be underspend for that year, but that doesn't necessarily mean there will be in future years. So that means you have less money to spend on effectively more staff later on. Absolutely, we don't want to be losing staff. We've got some fantastic staff here, so we do want to keep them. We do want to look at how we can retain them. Paying more money would be great, but it's not necessarily the answer. A lot of the roles, as John has said, have gone through a recent review, and all of those roles at that time did go through a job evaluation process. So the grades that have been set for those roles have been very recently through that process, so it's not likely to change. Remind me of the second part of your question, please.
I just asked, when we're losing staff and they're doing an exit interview, what are the reasons they're giving for leaving?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so everyone is offered the opportunity to have an exit interview. Some people take that up, some people won't. The feedback that we get from that is collated by HR, and HR will then share the key themes with relevant service areas. The reasons for leaving are really multiple different reasons. There's no common theme that we've had recently, but if there was, then we would hope to be tackling that before they get to the point of leaving. But that's certainly something that I can pick up with the team just to check on morale and hopefully keep the good stuff that we've got.
The only other thing I'd add to that is the market's quite difficult to recruit people. There's a general shortage of people who can do those roles, but we are trying. Any further questions? Lucas?
Have you been successful in getting this consultancy post, the consultant for fixed period for the development role? On page 29, 4.6. Because basically without this additional support, it may not be possible to deliver the program to existing timelines, and the program may need to be slipped.
It's probably a question for Ali Fisk, who is our head of property services. So it's one that I can take away and come back to you after the meeting.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No, thank you for those. So on the housing revenue account outturn, the committee resolves to note the housing revenue account revenue and capital outturn position for 2023-2024. I will propose that. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah.
Do you want to speak now, Lucas, or later?
Well, yes, I mean, I think, the theme seems to be slippage. But slippage is not a loss, nor is it a gain. It's something that's transferred into the following year. And yes, it makes a slight delay for tenants in certain works being carried out, or possibly also, like it's mentioned here, a possible slippage in acquisitions and new build. We hate to see it, but I do believe from all the feedback I'm getting that people are working very hard to minimize the slippage and use it for the best of the council. So, yeah, on the whole, it looks good, and it definitely just shows that we're careful with our money.
Thank you, Lucas. Any other points of debate? No, thank you. We'll have a vote. Those in favour of accepting the report? Again, unanimous. Not sure this is going to hold, but it's good to see that. Thank you.
I've just looked up on the system, the land that was purchased at James Sleeman Close Land. If that means anything to you? No.
I think it's part of Great Oldbury.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next item, Daisy, is Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. I'd like to introduce Tara Skidmore, Head of Assets and Investment, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, everyone. I'm going to present our position of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. And just to give you a little bit of background to this paper, in September 2021, Housing Committee made the decision to invest an additional 18 million into improving our energy efficiency across our council housing stock and ensuring that our SAP rating was an average across our stock of C or above. Just to be clear, in terms of the actual fund itself, that sits along all the grant work fund that we deliver. It also sits along our general improvement plans programmes, which we deliver every year. In March 2024, SDC did win an award this year. So we won an award for the best social housing-led retrofit programme by the Retrofit Academy. And we've been highly commended for the excellent work and achievement we've been doing and our professionalism across the retrofit area, which is really good news. Government have proposed a 3.8 billion fund over a 10-year period for energy performance work. And to date, SDC has been successful in all 3 bids that we've put forward, which were all 3 bids. And we have been able to bring into the HRA account 3.9 million additional money into our pot. And we, SDC, have match funded 4.1 million to deliver these works. Our first project was the demonstrator project down in Hamfallow Court. This was just over a £1.1 million project. And for that, we retrofitted 28 flats. And as a result of that, we managed to reduce and save residents on average £730 per annum on their energy spending bills per year. We've also managed to save 74 tonnes of carbon there in that scheme. And Wave 1 we've recently completed as well this year, and that was a 2.7 million project which benefited 160 of our properties, and we funded 1.8 million towards that as well. The headlines of that is that as a result of the works, properties have achieved a full SAP rating of a C on average across all of those properties, with our best one being at a C78, which is a really good score. On average, we will be saving our tenants £614 per year on their energy bills. That is a prediction. We don't actually know the full amount until a year after the project, when we will go back and analyse people's energy bills in a bit more detail. And in terms of carbon saving, that's 174 tonnes. And just to put these figures into perspective, that is a return flight from London to New York, which produces 4 tonnes of carbon. So how many times we're doing that? In terms of Wave 2, this is a £4.3 million project, and this is benefiting 250 of our properties. And we are expecting to save our homes, again, at the moment, £206 per annum, but that will increase as we get some more data around our tenants' energy bills. Looking at point 6, I talk about the HRA investment programme. So we do deliver annual investment programmes where we deliver loft and cavity wall installation, new roofs, windows, external wall installation as well. And all these works contribute to the energy efficiency of our homes. And in the last year, we delivered £3.2 million of this work on top of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund grant funded works as well. In conclusion to the report, we're retrofitting our housing stock but these decisions are both financial and resource limitations that come with them. And we need to make sure that the decisions we make are founded on sound financial assessments. And for that reason, we haven't been early adopters in some of the new energy technology that's been put out there. But you will see that I've said that we are going to be undertaking a review of the tenant services energy strategy this year. So we will be looking to do that because that strategy was done in 2017. And officers are continuing to take advantages of all new funding coming out. So there is a Wave 3 coming out very soon. And we will be looking to add heating into that because it's not necessarily looking at the fabric of the property. That's also looking at renewable technologies as well. So we're already doing our work, looking at our stock and getting our bid ready for when we're actually able to put it forward.
Thank you, Tara. Any questions for Tara? Lucas?
Yeah, I find it really interesting and brilliant work. And from this, I read that it's about 10% of our housing stock now has been sort of addressed by the decarbonisation fund, so nearly 500 homes. What is actually the overall average EPC rating of our housing stock? I mean, how many of our remaining sort of 4,500 are above C or... So I got no picture of that, so also then not have a picture of the total challenge we face.
Yeah, so we actually hold all EPC data on all of our properties. We use a system called Intelligent Energy, So we've got all of that information. It's actually one of our benchmark indicators in the report, so it's in there. So we do report on that. I couldn't tell you what it is off the top of my head, but I would be able to provide a report for you of all of that information.
Thank you. Marvellous.
If you could share that with the committee, that I'm sure they'd be read with interest. Any more questions? Charlie, then Carol.
Just a quick one. Just wondering why on the Wave 1 the average saving was £614, whereas for the Wave 2 works is only predicted to be 206. You did say it was going to rise, but is it going to rise by that much? Is it a case of it's different properties that are the Wave 2 properties are already better, so there's less to save, or is it different work that's being carried out?
It's a combination of both. So we have the predictions right before, so that forms part of the assessments that are undertaken. So also we are able to use our tenants' energy bills. So for Wave 2, we're not quite there yet. So they are just predictions that come out of Intelligent Energy, but we will be able to give a much more accurate cost later on as we get into that work, because we haven't actually undertaken that work yet. We've just completed the assessment. So Wave 2 is a 2-year project, whereas Wave 1 was a 1-year project. So we've got a little bit more time to deliver that work and gather that information.
Carol?
I was just thinking about the way forward from here, really. You said there's a new funding scheme coming up, that you're looking for them, and there's a new one coming up. I just wonder what the chances are of getting more funding. I know you've been very successful so far, but is the success likely to continue? I hope it is. But
So Wave 3 is part of the decarbonisation fund. It's the same pot of money. So because we're part of a consortium and we lead that consortium, we work with other providers as well. So it'll be a joint bid. I would like to think that we'd be successful in that. We put a lot of effort into those bids and look at what we can do to improve our stock, as well as other providers in South Gloucestershire as well.
Any more questions? No? I'll sum up as the proposer. Decarbonisation is expensive but vitally important. We've made very good progress and we lead as a local authority, and we do pretty well. There's still stuff to learn, but I'm really pleased with the progress that we've had, and I encourage everyone to note the content of this paper, because it's a good news story. Some of our stock is quite old. Lots of housing associations have much newer stock, and so it can seem quite expensive, but that's because we've started with our worst properties, but we're making good progress. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour, the committee resolves to note the content of the paper. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Again, unanimous. Thank you. I propose, Lucas seconded. Our next item is Stroud Council tenant complaints. I'd like to introduce Andy Kefford, the Strategic Head of Housing, to present the report. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So when a council tenant is dissatisfied with the service they receive, they can submit a complaint. That will then be considered in accordance with our complaint and feedback policy. So our policy is a corporate policy. It has 2 stages. So first stage is stage 1. If the complainant isn't happy with that response, they can escalate this complaint to stage 2. That will be carried out by a senior member of staff different to the first complaint handler. That would complete our internal process. So there's 2 stages. For any social housing tenant, if they're dissatisfied with the complaint after that stage, they can escalate their complaint to the social housing ombudsman. So the ombudsman has the power to either investigate the complaint, or say that actually there's no further action required. When they do investigate, they will ask for the whole file, they'll look at the history, they'll want our responses and feedback to that complainant, and then they'll make a determination. So say that determination could be that there's no finding there, it could be that there's maladministration, or in the worst case that there's severe maladministration. The Ombudsman also has the power to set compensation that housing associations, social housing providers would have to pay to that tenant. The Housing Ombudsman has a complaint handling code that it's had for a couple of years. It's always been good practice for housing providers to self-assess against that complaint handling code. But it's never been a requirement to send it back to the Ombudsman or to publish it on our website. But as of April this year, it is now a requirement. So the Social Housing Regulation Act introduced a number of new changes, which you'll hear about in due course. But one of them was to give more power to the Ombudsman. So they now have to ensure that social housing providers comply with that complaint handling code. And one way of doing that is to make sure that everyone has done the self-assessment, that it's presented to the governing body, so yourself as Housing Committee, that we appoint what they call a member responsible for complaints, so MRC, and that the committee provide a response that then is sent back to the Ombudsman as well as added to our website. The deadline for doing all of that is this Sunday, so it doesn't leave us a huge amount of time. So given that the local elections were early May, Gary and Lucas were appointed as chair and vice chair. They've kindly volunteered to be the MRC for this year. So you'll see in the report pack at, I think it's Appendix C, the statement that Gary and Lucas have put together, which is to scrutinise the self-assessment that we've done, provide feedback on it, and then to put it to yourself tonight to say, are you happy with it as the Housing Committee? If you are, we will update that to the website, send it to the Housing Ombudsman, and then share that more widely with our tenants as well. In terms of the self-assessment, a lot of it is good. The self-assessment has shown that our policy that we have is compliant with the code, and because it's across the council, it also gives us consistency. So how we handle complaints in housing is the same as how the rest of the council handle complaints. One of the really key things that we've noted from this year to last year is the percentage of complaints that have been returned in time. So there's complaint handling code timeframe, so 10 working days for stage 1, 20 working days for stage 2. The performance of the team has doubled over the course of the year in terms of meeting those timeframes. So I'll quickly take a moment to thank the staff for the hard work of doing that, because I've been at them for a little bit for the last year. So I'm really pleased that they've got to that level, and long may it continue. The self-assessment also shows that the level of complaints that we have is comparable with other organisations of our size. So it's somewhat reassuring that they're not way above or way below, where we're not maybe capturing feedback, or where we're having too much negative feedback. But so the self-assessment is in the pack, so you'll have had a chance to see it. So I think there's a lot of good things in there that we are doing, but there's always room for an improvement. So over the next 12 months, we will be looking to improve the complaint handling response times again. We'll also be looking at learning from the complaints and just ensuring we're embedding a positive complaint handling culture across the service, so that we can then learn and improve, hopefully reduce complaints in the longer term. So as I said, it's a requirement now for the MRC, so Gary and Lucas, to provide a statement for yourselves to sign off. So I don't know whether you wanted to say anything on that, but otherwise I'm happy to take questions.
I would just add, I've been through the report. There are a couple of areas where we were partially compliant, and I've asked, as you'll see in the recommendations, that we're updated on those, and we're also updated on anything that slips from being fully compliant to partially compliant or non-compliant. The team have made progress in their complaints. There's still a little way to go, like there is for every organisation, but I'm pleased with the progress, and I'm pleased that it's transparent, and the regulator is involved. I think regulation's a good thing. It's only those that are poor landlords that have to worry about it. We will do our best to comply about it. We won't get everything right, but I'm confident that the self-assessment is accurate, and I'm confident the team will put more work into making sure that our complaint performance improves, or we'll know about it and we'll hold them to account. Any questions of Andy, me, or in general? Lucas?
Yeah, I feel it puts my role, and I think all our roles as elected members, a bit in perspective, because sometimes it feels like everybody is moaning. Yeah, when you're an elected member and somebody phones you up and saying, oh, I didn't get that done, or what about that? And it's not just the housing, it's whether it's trees or potholes or whatever. So it's really good to see that even though we sometimes think, what's happening there, that overall it's a really good service. I think the one thing that I would say is, it all starts, often I feel, my experience, it starts with incomplete communication in the process. And it's difficult to achieve, and therefore I feel that this is a really good process. It's a good evolution also of where we are, and I think in a way with the pressure of the regulator on us as well, it gives it sort of discipline for us to really deliver an ever better service. We always have to strive for better.
Thank you, Lucas. Any other questions? No, I'll read out the resolution. So the committee resolves to examine the evidence referred to in the self-assessment and ensure it's complete and accessible to readers, including staff and residents. B, scrutinise the data and performance information, including the complaints, performance and service improvement report to ensure it is accurate, reliable and repeatable. Challenge any commentary or context to ensure that it's fair and it is a fair and reasonable assessment. And D, produce a written statement to the self-assessment to provide assurance that it is a true reflection of the landlord's complaint handling. Do we have a proposer for that? Carol, and a seconder. Matt, do you want to say anything now?
Yeah, I just want to say it's great that both Chair and Vice Chair are involved in this process, and that Andy is taking things seriously with the reviewing of the complaints and not resting on our laurels and trying to make sure that we're looking at it continually and not making sure that we just hit a target. So, yeah, no, it's perfect. Thank you.
Any items for debate? Any debate? Anybody wants to add? No. If we move, it all seems too smooth. Sorry. Those in favour of the resolution, please raise your hands. Okay. That's unanimous again. Thank you. So item 10 is a temporary accommodation strategy. I'd like to introduce Andy again, Strategic Head of Housing, to present the report. Thank you.
Yeah, evening again. So temporary accommodation strategy. Unfortunately, there are people who face homelessness, and when they do, they'll come to the council for assistance. The council have a statutory duty to provide advice, assistance, and to try and prevent and relieve homelessness. So every person that comes to us, we will first try to prevent their homelessness, whether that's keeping them in their own home if it's safe and reasonable to do so, or we'll try and support them into alternative housing. Where that's not possible, and there's multiple reasons why that may be not possible, we'll have a duty to provide emergency accommodation. So when we provide emergency accommodation, the council at the moment, the approach is to provide accommodation. Well, sorry, I'll start again. Our approach is to provide accommodation outside of the district in bed and breakfast. We do have 6 units of accommodation that we have ourselves in the district, but it's only 6. As you'll see from the report, there's an awful lot of demand around homelessness. The numbers are increasing. The numbers are increasing for temporary accommodation as well. That's not unique to Stroud. That's a national issue. If you speak to most other councils, they would also have the same or similar trends. So our current approach is to provide a hotel provision, often outside the district. As you can imagine, if you're homeless or facing homelessness, you've got a time of uncertainty. So placing someone far away from the district at that period of time is not good practice. It's not good for them. So this strategy is to look at flipping that process on its head. So to deliver the majority of our placements in the district and in our own stock. So rather than putting someone into a hotel where they may have basic facilities, often just a microwave, we will be providing temporary accommodation in our own stock where they'll have support. So they'll be given advice around how to manage that license to begin with, how to then prepare for move on, and when they do move on, give them those kind of life skills ready to sustain that tenancy. At the moment, if someone goes into a hotel and then into either a private rental or a social housing property, it's a very big jump. Someone who's managing in a hotel, there's no requirement for managing your utility bills or paying your standard rent as you would in a property. So often those tenancies can then fail because they've not had that interim support. So this strategy has a number of benefits. One is to provide a better level of service to people who are facing homelessness. 2, it's to try and prevent that repeat that cycle by providing that temporary, giving them the skills during that process. And then also quite crucially, as you'll see from the strategy, the cost of providing hotel provision is only going one way. That's not sustainable. If we change the approach, we can actually provide these services for less, so it'll be savings to the general fund, but we can do it where it will be cost neutral to the housing revenue account. So there's a number of different benefits to doing this strategy, changing the approach that we've got, because leaving it as it is isn't necessarily sustainable. It is obviously an option tonight to leave it as it is, but I'd recommend, if we can, that we go ahead with approving the temporary accommodation strategy. So that's what the request is of tonight, to review the strategy and give it approval. It's a 3-year strategy, so during that time we would gradually look to utilise our own stock, make best use of that stock, and as I said, get to the point where we have no longer a requirement of out-of-district hotel provision. I will make it clear that we will need hotel provision at some point. Sometimes that is the most suitable accommodation to use for certain households in the very short term, but in the longer term, using our own stock is what is recommended in this strategy. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Dave?
Thanks. Very interesting. Thanks, Andy. I have got a question, though. Looking at placements, it looks as if placements have gone up quite considerably in the 3-year period reported, roughly threefold. But the cost looks like it's only increased by about 50-odd%. And I wondered if there are any implications in terms of quality or location of placement that members should be aware of in ratifying the report.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good point. The figures that you're looking at are around the time of the pandemic, and at that time the government had a scheme called Everyone In. So that meant that everyone who may have been homeless or unsuitably housed had to be accommodated by each and every local authority. So that meant a lot of placements we delivered actually internally ourselves, so in our own stock. So that would be where some of that cost saving may be showing. In addition, we've actually co-commissioned Citadel House in Stroud, which is a 5-unit temporary accommodation, which is run by Gloucester City Homes. So that again is slightly cheaper than using hotel provision. The other thing is, in the report, it doesn't break down how long someone's gone into temporary accommodation. So although placements might be up, if they're not in for a considerable amount of time, then obviously the cost will vary. So unfortunately, there's probably not one answer to your question. There's quite a few different variables, but yeah, it's difficult to manage both trends in the same question, because the reasons for approach will be different and the length of placements will be different, as well as the location of the placements.
Anyone else? No? Thank you. So I'll read out our proposal. The committee resolves to approve the temporary accommodation strategy. Do we have a proposer? Carol, and a seconder? Elizabeth? Would you like to say anything now, Elizabeth, or wait till later?
No. I would just flag up the urgency of this. I think it's been very well expressed here that the critical problem with the current system is that it doesn't support people. We're aiming to move them into long-term accommodation, not just find temporary quick fixes. And I think that's really the key strategy that's being brought forward here. That this is a strategy which is designed to keep people in the local community wherever possible, close to support networks. And as such, I think it's very, very well worth supporting. It's doing exactly what it needs to do. I appreciate there's still challenges in the actual outworking of finding the places, but that overall arching aim, I think, is absolutely vital.
Anyone like to make any points in the debate? Lucas?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for the detail and extensive sort of reasoning that's gone into this report and in the appendices. Really good work.
Anyone else? I'd just like to add that I spent some time with Julian, who works in housing advice on homelessness, and we do quite a lot prior to people becoming homeless, whether that's working with their landlords, that sort of stuff. So hopefully this also allows us to have a more integrated response, and we can keep people and support them because they're closer and easier to work with. So I think it's a really good policy. I share Elizabeth's keenness to get it done as quickly as possible, and if there's anything we can do to move that forward. But it is a complex area and things do take time, but I agree with you, Elizabeth, entirely. Karen?
I can just say this in summing up, but if nobody else is going to speak, I'll say it now. Yeah. I strongly support this. I think my feeling is that we owe a special responsibility to the most vulnerable people in society. And in most cases, I think it is just not acceptable, actually, to send them to B&Bs out of the area. I know you haven't been able to avoid it, but I'm really pleased we're going to find a way around it, to find places where people can stay in touch with their support networks, their informal support networks, but also get the more formal support from the more, including the district council itself, but more formal groups around. And I think I agree with Elizabeth, actually, that it's urgent, and the sooner we can implement it, the better.
Okay, we'll have a vote on that. Those who agree with the resolution to approve the temporary accommodation strategy. Thank you. Unanimous again. Who says politics have to be confrontational, eh? Item 11 is the appointments to the performance monitoring roles. We have one nomination. Is there anyone else who would like to be a performance monitor? Charlie, thank you. Terry Cook, who in his absence has asked to be a performance monitor. We need two. We've got two. If people are interested in doing it in addition, that's perfectly okay. And it may be that Linda, who couldn't be here, would want to do that, but I don't see any problems with having more than two performance monitors. No. So thank you for those who have agreed. And Andy will be in contact with you to talk that through. No, we had to vote, but so who approves Charlie becoming a performance monitor? And who approves Terry? Both of those are unanimous, thank you. The next item is the member officers report, performance monitoring. That was a late paper. If anyone has any questions, feel free to do that. No, we normally have tenant representatives. I don't know why they're not here.
It's come to the end of their term, so we're now in the process of re-recruiting, so there'll be new tenant representatives shortly.
If you know people who are interested or would be good at that, please do flag that up as a possibility. We really value their input. We provide them with training and they're really helpful. And it's good to have the people that we're housing having their views, and they act as a good conduit. The next item is new homes and regeneration programme. Again, there was a late paper on that. Okay, we'll take that as read unless anyone has any questions, which we'll get answers to outside this meeting. Is everyone okay to take that as read?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the work programme, it's on the screen. Do members have any comments or questions on the work programme?
Looks hopeful that the new homes and regeneration program is on every time. So I look forward to lots of new homes.
Andy?
Thank you. Yeah, there are several items that we plan to bring to committee over this period. So there's quite a few policies that need updating, refreshing, or are new that we need to bring. So we will get this updated as soon as possible and circulate that for you, just so you've got a clear picture of what's to come. Okay, thank you very much. That's all of our items covered.
Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for officers for all the hard work. And I promise this will be the quickest meeting we ever have. But you'll value an hour-long meeting, and it has nothing to do with the football, I'm sure.